So, welcome back. We are going to do our first example of a 3/4 view head today. And I found this classic photograph of Henry Cavill as Superman. It's a perfect 3/4 view. A 3/4 view is anything that's in between a front view and a side view. Most of what we see in life is in between a front view and a side view. So this is something we're going to encounter a lot if you're going to a drawing class. And we're going to try to understand it in terms of some of the things we've learned about perspective. So we are going to try to start this drawing by thinking of what we're seeing as a kind of a box. So we're going to draw the face as the front of the box, but it's going away from us a little, like that. Hang on, let me fix my focus here. And there's a little less showing of this side of the box, which is going to go away from us a little more steeply. This is why I teach perspective before I teach faces, because the only way to draw the head in most positions is with a little bit of an understanding of basic perspective. Notice that his eye level is about the same right now as our eye level. So that means that his eyes are going to be going straight across the middle of the face like this. I probably need to shorten that chin just a little. And then the cranium is going to be very foreshortened, but this is like a construction, very simplified construction of what we're seeing here. So if you remember drawing heads from the side, which of course you do, the cranium is an elongated racetrack. Now it's very foreshortened, so it's compressed. The jawline is compressed, but the front of the face is more the way we normally think of it. So, everybody good so far? Now, I'm going to mark up the photograph a little bit. So this is sort of what we have so far. This is the main plane change between the front of the face and the side of the face. That is the other side of the front. This is a perspective box that's receding slightly. Here's a perspective box that's receding more sharply. And there's the jawline. So that's sort of very rough simplification of what we're seeing so far. If we go straight down, actually, let's find the center of this box with an X. And we can see that the bridge of his nose is slightly to the left of that center. And that's because the bridge of his nose is projecting off the front of his face a little bit. So we can go ahead and draw that X, find the center, and then we're going to put the bridge of his nose just to the left of that center. Okay, and the most important thing we're going to be talking about here is foreshortening. Does everyone remember foreshortening from when we were studying perspective? So I'm going to do a quick little demonstration of how this works. It's very important. If our faces were flat, the two eyes on our heads would be exactly the same size. Well, they are the same size when they're facing us, right? If our faces were entirely flat, these would still be pretty much the same size if this was turned away from us. Everyone following me? Because faces are not flat, what happens instead is so if faces were flat, these eyes would be the same. Faces are not flat. They're kind of horseshoe shaped. So that means these eyes are the same size when the head is facing us, but when the face turns this way, notice that the eye on the left gets more foreshortened and the eye on the right gets less foreshortened. And that's the thing that most people don't understand, is that when the face is, when you're looking right at us, both the eyes are a little bit foreshortened. They're both turning away from us slightly. Now this one on the left is foreshortened more and the other one is foreshortened less. So a very slight tilt of the angle of the face makes for very different sizes of eyes. And we're going to have to zoom in on this guy to see what we're talking about here. What I'm saying, and I want everyone to really think about this for a moment, is this eye here occupies much less space in our drawing than this eye here. In fact, if I measure, I would say the eye on the left is at least 1/3 smaller than the eye on the right. So the reason I'm emphasizing this is because when we're drawing the face from the front, the big challenge is achieving symmetry. We want everything to be the same on the left and the right. Now what we're faced with is a radical asymmetry. This eye is really small over here, and I'm going to block it in the way we've learned to do with eyes. Let me zoom in on my drawing as well so you can see that better. And notice this distance here between the bridge of the nose and the corner of the eye is very small. That's another thing we expect to see. So that eye blocks in like that. Then we have the bridge of the nose, which we located to the left of center. Then we've got this whole space. And notice that that space is about the same as this space. So the distance from the corner of the eye to this side of the bridge of the nose is about the same as this side of the bridge of the nose to the corner of the other eye. And what you're seeing is that we're going to draw this whole big open space here. We don't draw it on the other side. It's not visible because the bridge of the nose is turned. So that places this other eye all the way out here, where it should be, the corner should be coming out pretty close to the plane change on the side of the face. And so we end up with something like this. That's going to feel wrong to most of you because, again, you're going to feel that you need to have more symmetry than this. This should be about 1/3 wider than this. and this space is non-existent, this space is large. We're going to do the same approach we usually take for the irises. We're going to draw these little shark tooth shapes of the white of the eye on either side. Like there's one and there's one, and we're going to let the iris sort of just appear in between. So there's that. And on this side, notice that that little shark tooth here is very small, and it's relatively large on this side. And we end up with something like that. While we're zoomed in, let's go ahead and do the nose. And we're going to think about the geometry here of the proportions. And what can we find that's the same distance? So we know where this point is. This is sort of just above eye level. That's sort of where the little crease is at the top of the nose. I could try creating a triangle here, and I could see, is that an equilateral triangle is the question. It looks pretty close. So sometimes that works for finding the length of the nose. What we're saying is that this distance between the pupils is about the same as this distance to the bottom base of the nose. And if we zoom out, we can see that that should be about halfway between the brow line and the bottom of the chin, which it is. So let's go with that as the length of the nose. Now we're going to look for where this tip of the nose projects to, and notice it projects just to the right of the iris, like this. So that's a construction line that will help. And we're going to look at where this reaches to, and this reaches to just inside the corner of the other eye. So that's about here. And then to get from this point, which we know, to this point, which we found, we need to slope a couple degrees out until we get about 2/3 of the way down, and then we're going to project out with that little bulbous tip of the nose. We cut back at about 45 degrees here. We work that parentheses form of the ala inside the bottom of the box as normal. And all that's left is to draw the nostrils. This one is very foreshortened because it's going away from us. And this one is relatively elongated. And that's the theme today, is once you get away from that frontal view, you get into asymmetry everywhere. To make this a little more easy to read, a little more legible, I'm going to go ahead and do a little shadow map of the tip of the nose like this, and a little first shading, just so I can start to see the form in 3 dimensions, which is going to help me a lot as I move forward. I'm going to do the same thing with this shadow shape around this inside of the eye socket. That's always one of the deepest areas of shadow on the face. And I'm going to also notice that this entire eye is in shadow. So I'm going to go ahead and just do a first shading over that whole area. And this eye is also mostly in shadow. So I'm going to do a little shading there too. So that was our close work. We're going to zoom out now. I'm going to get rid of some of these. Maybe I'll leave the red lines on for another few minutes until we get a little further. Oops. So you'll notice very subtly we've got this at our eye level is straight. The nostrils, notice the nostrils create an orthogonal that's tipping up just a little. And then the mouth is going to be a third of the way down. And that's going to tip up a little more because remember, we're dealing with this as a perspective box. The form of his mouth is, well, let's do the philtrum first. So we can see, I want you to try to imagine where this point is, like at the top of his philtrum. It's right at the back of the septum, right? That's this part of the nose. So we want to look, try to imagine where the septum would end. Notice it's sort of closer to this nostril on the right. And then we're going to just do the outline of that philtrum. It's really good to sort of just imagine where that a form like this begins. Make sure that you keep it off to the right. Because we've practiced so much from a front view, a lot of you are going to want to put that philtrum right under the, like center it under the tip of the nose, but that's not where it belongs. And then I'm going to draw this sort of little dagger form of the philtrum. And that's going to give me good information about where to put the central curve of the mouth, which on Henry is very wide and flat. Can you see that? It's like this wide, flat curve. It's not like a lot of people have a much smaller, pointier central portion of the mouth. And here's the other area that you're really, a lot of you are going to be tempted to make a big error. Like, so here's the central curve of the mouth. Here's the left side. Here's the right side. If he was facing us, they'd be symmetrical. If his face was flat and he was tipped away, they would be pretty symmetrical. But remember, the mouth, as you know, if you have dentures or an Invisalign or something, the mouth is a horseshoe shape. So when you take a horseshoe shape and tip it slightly this direction, you see what happens? The curve on the left gets really short because it's going like straight away from us. And the curve on the right actually gets longer because now it's like facing us more. It's less foreshortened. So most of you, the most common mistake I see in a 3/4 view is this, and don't draw this. Most people just draw the mouth symmetrically, and you'll notice that that doesn't look right. It doesn't look like it's curving around his face. So what we do instead is we foreshorten this side on the left, which barely projects past the tip of his nose. You see that? So that side's really short, and this side is relatively long. And if you get that asymmetry, what's going to happen is it's going to look like that horseshoe is making that turn. I am going to very lightly outline his upper lip just to shadow map it, and then just pop that into shadow, and then I'm going to put a little shadow under his bottom lip, and that's all we're going to do for that. Actually, I'm going to draw notice his chin. If we imagine a center line coming down his face, and you don't have to draw this, although a lot of artists do like to do this, the center line would do something like this. There's the center of his bottom lip. And notice that the center of his chin, here with that little dimple, is to the left of, see, there's that dimple. Here's the center of his bottom lip. So that's an important relationship to get. So here's the center of his bottom lip. There's the center of his chin. It's slightly to the right of that. And think of the chin as a kind of an egg shape. It's okay that it's coming down below the bottom of my box. He's got a strong chin. He's Superman after all. And we're going to go as usual from the chin to, we're going to do the cheekbones next. Notice this cheekbone barely projects out past this eyelid. There's a very short little distance out here. And it's a fairly strong curve for that cheekbone. And here we can see he's got a what we'd call a chiseled face. See how there's this kind of a plane change that connects the cheekbone to the chin. So I'm going to draw that in. And then I'm going to draw that angle of the jaw, which projects out past that. Does everyone see what I'm looking at? And this cheekbone is showing up mainly as a plane change. Notice that his face is not an actual box. It's this shadow edge, which defines the plane change, does something like this. So we're going to be thinking of that cheekbone in terms of light and dark. And I'm going to throw a little shadow over this whole area, again, just to help me see my drawing in 3 dimensions. And then I'm going to zoom out and just throw a little bit of a neck on there. And then in a minute we will deal with the rest of the neck and hair details. Okay, so I'm going to get more definite now on the jawline. I think it is time to clean up some of these annotations so we can see what we're doing a little more. Notice there's not a hard overlap here. I can see a hard overlap right at the back of the jaw here. Notice his jaw is turning below the corner of his mouth. That's where we want to look for that to happen. And it's got this weird little piece of light on it. His ear starts around the bottom of his nose. and ends up around the top of his eyes. That's what we have come to expect in a head that is level like his is. I could always double check. I'm not doing a lot of measuring in this drawing, but I could measure, say, this distance here to here and compare it to this. See, when I'm from the bridge of the nose to the corner of the eye is about the same as the corner of the eye to the front of the ear, so I'm pretty happy with that ear placement. But that would be an easy thing to get wrong, so it's not a bad idea to measure that. Here's the tragus and the antitragus. The helix. And in a 3/4 view, notice we're seeing the outside of the helix here, and then it's flipping around, and now we're seeing the inside of the helix here. You can even see the light coming through. And then we're going to curve from the antitragus up and around to the antihelix. So now I'm going to do a little bit of ear shading. And there's that. Now we have a better idea where the back of the neck is. Here's that sternocleidomastoidus muscle that starts behind the ear, curves down towards the pit of the neck, and then here is the trapezius muscle, which comes up behind that. And what I like to do when I see an intersection like this is I like to relate it to something I've already drawn. So here's that little intersection between the two muscles. There's the bottom of the chin. Make sure you're intersecting. Your trapezius reaches up a little higher than chin level, if that makes any sense. And I want to emphasize again, we don't see a hard overlap here, so don't mindlessly draw a hard line here. The line that matters is this one. This is the cast shadow edge. And then we can just throw a shadow over all this. Little shadow over the bottom of the chin. And don't make stuff up, like if you don't see an edge in nature, don't artificially draw it just because you think there should be one. You'd only see a hard overlap here if our eye level was just a little higher compared to his. And as I explained before, your brain really sort of takes over, and you might actually think you're seeing an edge here because you can see an edge very clearly here, and you can see it very clearly here. So your brain is going to want to fill in the gap, but don't put that in your drawing. Okay, we're going to deal with the cranium a little bit. Here's that little bit of brow ridge and forehead.
I know that guy. Do you know where Zach and John
So now, because my eyes probably weren't perfectly centered and I added a little bit to the chin, we're going to be adding some to the top of the cranium. And that's before we have hair. So but to get the when we add the hair in, we're going to be coming up even higher. Something like this. And you'll notice my drawing, and hopefully yours also, it looks a lot more like Superman with hair. You've never seen a bald Superman. Although, was there talk of The Rock playing Superman? I guess he would have been bald. And because he has black hair, I'm going to just do a first shading. And add a little bit of color information to my drawing. And at this point, I can start to recognize him in my drawing, which means I can start to see some of my mistakes. As usual, I gave him a little too much width across the face, so I'm going to trim down this cheekbone a little and this angle of the jaw. So that just took a few pounds off him. And I'm going to add a half tone along this side of the nose, almost a shadow right here. Clean up some of my construction lines. And in order to start getting closer to a finished effect on this drawing, I'm going to be looking for some of my darkest darks. Because right now you'll notice the shading on the face is reading a little too dark because I don't have any of my blacks in the drawing yet. So look what happens when I just go ahead and blacken the pupils. Shade the iris down a little darker. The upper lash line could be a little darker. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Blacken the pupil. Shade the top of the iris where it disappears under the lid. And darken the iris a little. Now that the pupil is dark enough, I can quickly, it sort of invites me to do a little darker shading of the eyebrow and the eye socket areas. But I do not ever want to press hard on my drawing and create those blacks until I'm close to being done, because those are harder things to take back, right? If I need to redraw the eye position, I'm going to have a hard time erasing that black pupil that I just drew. So there's a level of commitment at this stage of the drawing. You're just basically, your drawing might not be perfect, but you're basically saying, okay, I'm not going to be changing this much more. Now to get this form to turn better, I want to go back and erase my shadow map, and I want to shade that as a softer edge. Remember, the more gradually a form turns, the softer the shadow edge is going to be. So and this, when you have a little practice drawing, this stage should feel almost like you're sculpting something. You're really using light and dark to define the contours of a form, just like a sculptor would use a sculptor's tool. He's got a very blocky face, which I've probably exaggerated a little bit without meaning to. So yeah, I'm feeling just still a little too much width across my drawing, so I'm just gonna take off a little bit of his neck. We're going to go a little darker on the inside corner here. The inside corner of this eye socket. And notice this, he's got a very prominent brow ridge, which we're going to define with some halftones. We're going to shade very lightly under it. That's not full shadow, it's just a little halftone. And then we're going to put an even lighter halftone above it. Just practice drawing with your lightest possible touch. And notice that that's a step or two lighter than over here where we're actually going into shadow. I could make his neck a little thinner on this side too. For final shading, we may as well just get in here and do a little closer examination of the shadows around the nose, for example. This is a halftone on this side of the face. This is actual shadow beginning right about here. This is a core shadow going across the tip of the nose. It's very wide on this side, and on this other side it's very foreshortened. You see that? And this whole form of around the nostril here is in shadow. And then there's this dark cast shadow on the philtrum. And this is one of those places where that little sense of reflected light up under the bottom surface of the nose is going to make the nose feel like it's projecting out past the face. There's a subtle little overlap here that I don't have yet. You see how the tip of the nose overlaps the ala right there. And once again, this nostril is elongated. This one is very foreshortened. And all these plane changes are very gradual, so we're going to use that soft Shading up into the plane changes. Like that. Moving downward, we have a little halftone on this side of the philtrum.